First of all, thanks very much, Dan, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. By way of an introduction, I'm Lawrence Flynn. I'm the chief exec of a business called Artificial Solution, as has been stated. We're in fact a Swedish company. We're centered out of the Nordics equivalent of Silicon Valley, Stockholm, home of many successes. We're a globally deployed member of the natural language software community. We operate in 35 languages today, and we're deployed in at least as many countries around the globe. We have a European heritage, but we've established our business in North America in the last couple of years, and I'm pleased to say that, based from our US headquarters in Mountain View, we actually have our most rapid growth in the US marketplace. So today, the title of my presentation is about the power of natural language interaction. However, I want to make this a little bit more generic. I want to make this a little bit less specific to the individual problems of natural language and more the natural language in the context of the enterprise, which is our customers. Our customers are major blue-chip multinational businesses. And I want to start this within the context of a slightly different question. It's a very simple question. It's what if ... Okay? It's pretty easy. As a linguist, that's only 6 letters. Okay? It's good. So let's think about that what if question, because that simple what if question is what has powered some of the biggest disruptions in industry over time. What if there was a way that I could make money transporting people directly from A to B in motor cars without owning any of the infrastructure? What if there was a way that I could provide short-term accommodation to people without having to buy any real estate? What if there was a way that I could service the needs of every shopper without having to open a single store? You can easily identify who I might be talking about that, but at the start of each one of those hugely disruptive companies started with a simple what if question. So the what if question that I'm alluding to is relevant to the enterprise market, and it's also very, very significant in today's enterprise world, because those businesses have entered entire new segments and disrupted them seemingly, although not really, of course, seemingly at will and overnight. Now, I needed to come up with a more generic view of the what if question. So I came up with this one, okay? You have to bear with me for 2 reasons. I've subsequently come to learn that the walking tree is the Stanford University mascot, so apologies for anybody's infringement. At least it's geographically topical. And, you're probably thinking, this doesn't seem that close a proximity to the value of natural language, the power of natural language interaction, but bear with me just a little while and I'll explain to you why it is. So let's just explore that. What would actually happen if trees could walk? Well, you might get some cool snowboarding type trees that want to go live in the Rockies. You might get some more relaxed types that prefer the beach. But the truth is that I strongly suspect that they would really look at this just in their Darwinian context. They'd look at it as an opportunity to improve their operating environment to flourish, grow, and reproduce. And that is a problem for trees right now because, of course, as a tree, where you start life, that's where you finish life, right? And the only choice you have as a tree is to try and optimize it given that context. But that isn't true of the enterprise marketplace. Where enterprises start is not necessarily where they need to finish. But an amazing number of enterprises do fail when those what-if companies enter and disrupt their marketplaces they fail to be agile trees and remain rooted, while those businesses that are more dynamic, are more what if, take away their market share, their profitability, and their customers. In the enterprise world of today, the wind of change, the challenge to the tree, is blowing more rapidly than ever before. The changes in the technology landscape that we, all as individuals, now take for granted, now have huge benefits from, have enabled a completely different landscape, something that is a challenge to the institutionalized enterprises of today. Technology advances like the ubiquitous availability of the internet, technology advances like the massive revolution into mobile computing, and technology advances like the huge scale adoption of social media. The what-if companies that I mentioned earlier are all great examples of how agile businesses have been able to take advantage of this wind of change, and instead of it seeing as a danger that it will topple the tree, use it as an advantage to formulate new strategies with which to disrupt marketplaces. But let's look at this again from the landscape of the enterprise. How does a traditional enterprise respond in this changing world, leveraging these technological challenges that make it easy for their competitors to be companies that they've never heard of, that make it easy for them to make it difficult for them to be complacent about assuming that their competition is the same competition that it's always been? Well, actually, trying to focus on language again, we think that the answer to that lies in one 4-character word: data. Okay? Now, it's one word, it's 4 characters, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but data is important. In fact, studies show that 90% of business decisions, active business decisions taken in enterprises, 90% of them are not empirically data-based. They're hunches. Strangely, it also teaches us that businesses that do base their decisions on data, verifiable data, ideally from more than one source, those businesses actually are twice as likely to flourish as the businesses that make decisions based on data, based on hunches. I apologize. Okay? So when we look at perhaps some of the technology giants who've entered into marketplaces, we might think that they're doing this on the basis of hunches. After all, the 90% rule would say that they are. But actually, the harsh reality is they're sat on a gold mine of data and they're leveraging it to make business decisions. Apple, of course, knows what apps you use. Google knows the precise language you use when you're searching, whether you're searching with text or whether you're searching with voice. They know the precise language you use. Nobody understands your shopping cart better than Amazon. And because of that, these technology giants are able to leverage their data in order to make decisions that de-risk their investments and allow them to focus in areas where they know there is a known market need, a known market demand, and where they can leverage the technological wind of change to their advantage. But what if you're not a technology giant? What if you're an executive at a bank or an airline or an insurance company? How do you deal with this? How do you deal with this data-driven, empirical decision-making? Well, first of all, you need to recognize something. You need to recognize that these very tech giants that I'm talking about are conditioning your customers. They're setting expectations of what an engagement looks like. They're making it available to them 24/7, anywhere in the world. So these companies are setting this expectation, and you, as an enterprise, need to respond, okay? And to do so, you need to engage with them on an equal footing based on empirical data. Now, normally when I talk to our customers and prospects about this is kind of the first objection that comes up to me. Hold on a minute. I've heard about that. That's the big data thing, right? The IT guys started that 3 years ago, and we got it. It was taped. We know that big data thing, right? But what we know is that not all data is equal, okay? The fact is that the vast majority of the data that's been collected by enterprises is the data that they could capture. It's the data that was transactional. It wasn't the data that was the first-person singular voice of their customer, okay? It wasn't the best qualitative data to make decisions about their customers about, okay? In fact, curiously, most enterprises have looked at the opportunity of the wind of change in a different way to the way in which the tech giants have when they've been conditioning their consumers. Instead of using this technological wind of change to further their customer engagements, in fact, they've used it to focus on operational efficiencies, which naturally, of course, is easy to get past the CFO because there's a payback. However, there's a consequence. The consequence is that those self-same enterprise customers put, thanks Dan, a new chasm between them and their customers, right? They made a massive disconnect happen because they focused on using this to operationally improve. They built their ROI models on what it was going to do for them. They didn't build their ROI models on what it was going to do for their customers and what it was going to do for them in terms of understanding their customers. Because this technology that could have been their friend turned into their enemy. And this is where I get the second objection from prospects and customers, and they say, hold on a minute, we do talk to our customers. We may have shut all the branches down, yeah? You can't come to our office anymore, but we've got a call center, okay? But we know how much people enjoy call centers, right? In a recent survey, I can't name the company, they asked a question of a middle-aged lady about her customer call center experience, to which she replied that she would rather take a bath with her father than go through it again. So we don't need to know that it's not really an outreach channel for customers. In fact, it's not even a representatively good source of data. Don't get me wrong. If we have call center data, it's useful. It's really useful. It is, in many cases, first-person singular voice of the customer. I'm not decrying that. It's very, very helpful, and we use it all the time in our customers and prospects. But it's not representative, because it's only the people who will endure the pain to get there that are actually giving you the data. And that is not representative of a cross-section of your customers and your prospects. So there's a massive disconnect there, and the call center doesn't reach across that divide. However, there's no doubt that enterprises absolutely must reach across the divide, because otherwise the what-if companies will reach out for them, and they will wake up to having had the marketplace stolen away from them. So, how can these enterprises reach out to their prospects and customers? Well, we know that enormous number of trends are at work in the marketplace. We've talked about, Dan mentioned a couple in terms of chatbots and bots and mobile applications and so on. And we know from Google, like in the last couple of years, 2015, mobile search overtook desktop search. May 2016, 20% of mobile search, so that's the biggest share of the market, is now driven by voice. That was non-existent 3 years ago. 20%. If it's only 50-50 still, which I doubt it is in favor of mobility, then that means that at least 10% of all Google searches are driven by voice. So we know that there are ways to outreach to these customers that are contemporaneous with the technology that is being conditioned into their usage and behavior by the tech giants. And why are enterprises not following this? Well, of course, there is the issue of the use of technology for operational efficiency rather than customer outreach, but it's a challenge for them. It's a challenge for them to find ways to acquire the data, but they need to do it. They have no alternative but to get the data. Otherwise, they will cede their own customer marketplaces to others that will. Okay? And in particular, what they need to grasp hold of is the first-person singular voice of the customer data, because it's the ability to listen in on 1 billion sales calls, on 1 billion customer service calls, on every single interaction that every single one of your employees have. Now, many of you may have seen before, it's about the life cycle of data, the 4A model. The first A number 1, is acquire. First of all, let's get the data. That seems like a good thing. Secondly, let's aggregate it. Let's get it together. Let's metadata enrich it. Let's bring some value to the data that we've acquired. Thirdly, let's analyze that data. Okay? We'll come back to that later, because analyzing unstructured, conversational, natural language data in the first person, singular voice of your customer at scale is not a trivial undertaking. And finally, the fourth A is act. Because if we've got all this data and we don't use it for decision-making purposes, we're wasting the opportunity to be twice as effective as our competitors. Now, the interesting thing here is that enterprises are failing at the very first A. Sure, they've got a big data lake. Yeah, they've invested in more Hadoop than enough. But it's transactional data. It's things that are in essentially giant spreadsheets. It's not the voice of your customer. It's not the people who can help you understand where your products come short. It's not the people who can tell you where to extend your offerings. It's not the people who can tell you what works and what doesn't. So enterprises are failing at the first A. They simply are not in the business of acquiring the data. The call center, we've already established, doesn't do that. Not in a representative way, and not in a scale way, and not in a very representative of the problem way. Now, why aren't enterprises reaching out across this divide to their customers? Well, there's a cultural thing that we've talked about, okay? But there are other things that are forcing them. One is that they need to be able to deliver solutions which are contemporaneous with those that their customers are being conditioned to from the tech giants. And many enterprises think that that is simply not possible. They think that surely all the smartest people work at these tech companies. We can't compete for those resources to build the equivalent solutions. Well, we'll come back to that later. Maybe there doesn't need to be a need for them to compete for the resources. And secondly, it's partly to do with the industry. We need to persuade them that as enterprises, they can engage in outreach, that they can cross this chasm that they have created by leveraging internet technology as an operational efficiency model rather than utilizing it for a customer outreach. We, as an industry, have to help those enterprises understand it, because those are the enterprises that are going to help pay our R&D bills and in turn build them better and better solutions. We need to explain to them how they can overcome this problem of failing to get to the first base, of failing to acquire the data. Now, in so doing that, we need to look at what advice would we give them. And of course, much as I'd like to, I'm not entitled to speak for the entire industry, okay? But I can tell you a little bit about us at Artificial Solutions, our engagement with our real-life prospects and customers, and how this pans out in our advice to them. And since we like things to be linguistic and simple, we've had a four-letter word in data. Two of the letters are the same, that's good. Yeah? We've had 4 A's, see, that's all 4 the same letter. Couldn't be quite as good in the advice this time. We had to go to 5 alphanumeric characters. Yeah? However, 3 of them are the same. 2 of them are binary. Okay? So what does it mean, this 5-letter advice to the enterprise challenged by the strong winds of change, forced into responding to the needs and threats brought about by the what-if companies of tomorrow? Well, it actually stands for end-to-end for enterprise. Okay? And what do I mean by that? Let me explain a little bit further about that. Okay? So the first of 2 important things about the end-to-end piece is the life cycle. Okay? Enterprises can only engage in outreach to their customers in engaging applications that exceed their users' expectations if we, as an industry, put tools in their hands that enable them to manage that complete life cycle. Giving them pieces of it and expecting them to plug it together, well, it's great for the systems integration community, who are amongst my best friends. However, as an enterprise, that doesn't make it easy. First of all, we need to be able to give them tools that enable them, the experts in their business, to build these engaging outreach applications. So they need to be able to build them without having to compete with Amazon and Google and Microsoft for the world's best computational linguistic talent. They need to be able to do that. So as an industry, we need to provide them with an end-to-end platform so that they can manage the whole process that starts with something that is easy enough for them to build really smart and really engaging applications. To do that, we'll require that we need to de-skill the task for the users of those systems to a level where, without compromising on the user experience, you can build truly engaging outreach applications. And that's a challenge for the industry, to build things that are sufficiently human-like, intelligent, and capable without adding massive complexity and massive challenges to the model. And we need to put that as one homogeneous technology in the hands of the enterprise so that they can gain control. The second thing is they need to be able to deploy it. Now, many people that will mean a cloud deployment for, but in other cases it will mean on-premise. If you're a bank, there's a very high probability all my banking customers have the solution on-premise. But it needs to be a technology that's easy to deploy to, and yet supports huge volumes, huge scalability, and ultra-rapid performance. In typical live instances of our engine, it responds within 3 milliseconds. So we know the challenges of deploying at scale. Of course, if you succeed in building out these applications and deploying them to your customers, then you solve for the problem of the first day. Then you acquire the first-person singular voice of your customer at scale. Not just the people who have a problem to call the call center with, not just those people, but anybody who interacts with you at any touch point of the application. And of course, in collecting that data, you need to solve for scale. It is, quite genuinely, a big data problem. Further complexity is that it's unstructured, natural language, conversational data that you're capturing in the first person singular of your customer. And you might be capturing that in some of our cases. Our customers have over 100 million customers. So that's a lot of people that you've got to store those conversations from. A lot. So it's really about building and providing them as part of the platform in an integrated manner, something that allows them to build, deploy, and collect. And of course, what we learn from the life cycle of the data is that that is only so much of the journey. We need to give them the tools to bring that data to life. They've gone to all the trouble of building it. They've reached out across the divide to their customers, and we need to help them as an industry, provide them with a tool set which enables them to bring that data to life. And that's not so easy. If you've got one entry that says yes, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It kind of depends on the question, yeah? Would you like to cancel your credit card? Probably not so great, right? Would you like to upgrade to first class? That's probably a different quality of outcome, right? So you need to be able to understand conversational, high volume, huge scale data rapidly. In fact, better still, why not use that data that you've got as an enterprise through reaching out to your consumers to personalize the experience? Because you know what the user said to you last time, at least if you've got any kind of authentication in place. So we need to provide solutions to enterprises as part of a homogeneous platform that enable them to analyze this. And I don't just mean this in terms of operational efficiency. How many calls did I divert from the call center? That doesn't tell me anything about outreach to my customer. So instead, what I need to do is provide them with a tool set that enables them to utilize the data. And of course, as I'm sure that this will come up in a number of sessions, utilizing tools means in many cases here machine learning, because the scale of the problem is beyond human parsing. We need to leverage machine learning techniques in order to be able to drive successful outcomes for our customers. And they need to be able to utilize that data as a virtuous circle. They need to be able to utilize that to build the applications that their customers want, to provide them with the services and products that they want, and they also need to utilize that data to continuously improve the applications that they've developed to reach out to those customers. Now here I want to pause for a moment to talk about this, because one of the paradoxes of this is, how do you get going if you don't have any data? Well, this is a real world problem for us, because sometimes we'll go to an enterprise customer and say, we've got some call center transcripts, you want to get going with that? And that, as I've already said, that's great. Sure, we'll do that. But in many cases, we're working with customers to launch brand new things. They've never come to market. So in that case, the platform needs to be able to support data-driven implementation methodologies and non-data-driven implementations, and in the vast majority of our customer use cases, hybrids of the two, where we have imperfect data to get us started. But at least we can deploy then rapidly, easily, and collect data both during pre-live testing and so on, and also after live testing, in order to get the optimal experience and build this virtual circle of learning. The second way in which the E to E is important is that today enterprises are faced with the challenge of their customers living in all sorts of different ecosystems. As an enterprise, you can't say, I'll only trade with you if you're on an Android phone. You can't do that. As an enterprise, you have no choice but to offer the full gamut of services to where your customers live. You can't dictate to them that they must only use Facebook Messenger and they can't use other platforms. However, what you also cannot do is you cannot rely on different technologies to address the user experience in each of these channels. You can't have a different level of natural language understanding in one channel to the one that you deliver on the other channel. So whatever it is that you use for your platform of choice, you have to be able to seamlessly and easily provide full multi-channel support across different technologies. And you have to be able to support that in a way that makes sense. Because not all of the same outbound communication channels support all the same things. Some, you might be able to play a video down one bot channel but not down another. Some would be speech-driven, some wouldn't. But what is important is, as an enterprise, you must centralize this in order to surface it. Otherwise, what you're going to do is proliferate different qualities of brand experience to your consumers. And that's bad. That's bad indeed. So when we're giving our advice to our customers, we're talking about the E to E, but we're also talking about 4E. Okay? And this is perhaps, well, it's arguably the most important part of it, but actually maybe not the sexiest. 4E, in the first instance, means quite literally that it's for the enterprise. They cannot rely on getting second-hand information through various, pay-per-click or use of somebody else's device in the home or whatever, because they're ceding that data to a third party. They need to be able to be in control. It needs to be for them, for their customers, tailored to their brand, and exceeding their customers' expectation, irrespective of the use case. And that makes it challenging for the enterprise. Because in order to do that, assuming that they're not going to go out and set up something in direct competition with the tech giants, we need to provide them with something that's easy. We need to provide them something that's productive. We need to provide them something that itself is agile and can respond quickly to changes in the market. And because it's the enterprise market, and particularly with us as a European heritage business, we have multiple dimensions to address. There's multi-everything. There's multi-language, multi-user, multi-channel. The multis keep going. And that's the reality that our customers find themselves in, needing to provide these solutions across multiple channels in different languages, and to be able to compare and contrast, to be able to learn at that scale and that way. And that's a real need for the enterprise market to be able to address its customers correctly. Also, and I think this was touched on a little bit early on, we need to do this in the context of the IT infrastructure of the modern enterprise. That means that perhaps we need to be on-premise, perhaps we need to be in the cloud. But it sure as heck means that they worry about things like testing. They worry about security. They worry about workflow. They worry about version control and rollback. They want to be able to be in control of all of those things. And so we need to empower them with the technology, and that is our advice to them. And of course, it's logical, therefore, that this E to E advice is in fact an encapsulation of the governing principles that predetermine how we develop software. We develop software that is for the enterprise and provides them with an end-to-end solution in the way that I've articulated it. Now, what does this mean in relation to trees? Well, by providing enterprises with an opportunity to cross the chasm that they've chosen to put in place between them and their customers by putting them in control of the development of genuinely compelling outreach applications in natural language to their customers, by allowing them to capture the first-person singular voice of their entire demographic. We enable them to cease to be rooted to the spot. They have a competitive advantage over people that don't do that. And of course, they must get started, yeah, because other people can come in over the top. You'll be pleased to know we're drawing to a conclusion here. So in summary, although perhaps many of you are wondering what the heck's he talking about with walking trees, we are really talking about a serious challenge for every enterprise that is out there today. It's a very real challenge. Those enterprises, and I meet them, and I'm sure either you do or people in your organizations do, or you see it yourselves in your own businesses. They are worried about people leveraging technology to disrupt their marketplaces. It's a very real issue. Their competitive landscape has expanded from the people that they knew at the beginning to people that they're worried about they don't even know the name of today. The what-if companies that are going to disrupt their marketplace tomorrow. The key issue for them is that some of those competitors have a lot of data. They have a lot of data because they're controlling consumer experiences at the front end and capturing that data as the users are using their applications. And we know that enterprises that collate this data and utilize that data intelligently will be twice as likely to succeed as their competitors. So if that is the truth, then the data is key. The problem is that the enterprises are failing at the first A. They are not acquiring the first-person singular voice of their customer. And the reason that they're not doing it is because they need to develop outreach applications to cross the chasm, to cross the divide that utilizing technology only for operational efficiency inevitably leads to. The challenge for them is further complicated because we know how quickly the trough of disillusion follows the hype cycle. We know how quickly it was that after a flurry of announcements about bots, that the press in the same day was talking about the poor quality of some of those applications. Yeah? We saw it firsthand. And we know as an industry, this is hard to recover from. It's a much slower rate of ascent out of the trough of disillusion than it is into it. And our enterprise customers cannot afford that. And the key there is that they need to be able to exceed customer expectations. And that means, of course, that they need to make investments. They need to see it as strategic. They need to support it as strategic. And they need to invest in it as strategic. And why wouldn't it be strategic maintaining a conversation with every single one of your customers? Learning from that conversation at scale and repositioning your business based on empirical data to be twice as competitive as your competitor. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, the reason is it's not easy for them to do it. And the reason it's not easy for them is because they don't understand the capabilities of the marketplace. And the marketplace doesn't always address those needs. And we're on a journey ourselves of development, right? We're on release 4 of our platform. But there will be 5 and 6 and 7. But the platform needs to be E to E for E. It needs to be for the enterprise. It needs to be end-to-end in terms of the life cycle of the engagement, the capture of the data, the utilization of the data, and the machine learning-driven improvement. It needs to be end-to-end in terms of the spectrum of technology from one end to the other that they outreach to their customers on. It simply can't choose one channel, one different experience across it. So to come right back to the power of NLI, the actual title, when we forgot about all those trees, the actual title of the presentation. What is the power of NLI? It's the power of business continuity. It's the power to prevent people coming into your marketplace and disrupting it overnight. The value of NLI is that it's a mission-critical technology for enterprises today, I mean. Enterprises need to embrace this mission-critical technology or face extinction. That's the reality. Certainly there are household names around the world that have gone bust because these what-if companies have come in and stolen their lunch. And so, although today, owning an NLI platform, having outreach to your customers, engaging with them in applications that exceed their expectations is not on the must-have shopping list of every CIO, it will be. They will need to address that, and they will need to make that part of their business strategy in order to survive in this ever-changing world. So I'd very much like to thank you for your attention. I think I've done not too bad a job to keep it on time there, which is good for you. I'm not quite sure where we're going next with the agenda.
Okay, we have time for a few questions.
Okay. Sure.
I think one of the key things you said, this is great, is end-to-end across the enterprise, collecting data not just from the call center, but from other sources. What's been one of the biggest challenges, though? What's been one of the biggest challenges, though, has been able to pull all this data because of the silos and within different organizations. This piece might own this particular part of the data. So how do you see bridging that gap of being able to pull the data from these multiple silos? It's a cultural thing within a lot of these enterprises.
I think you touch on a very valid point. Having a European heritage, where data is the cause of a lot of litigation, we certainly empathize with the situation that you articulate and the silos and so on and so forth. And I also fully accept that the data, is not, even the data that's collated by these applications is not the only source of data, and the best value comes by doing the second A and amalgamating the data across these multiple silos and divides. We go, for instance, we go as far as we can. So in many cases, what's in our data repositories, it's not just the actual spoken word of the customer. It's also, the GPS location of the device, the time of day, and so on and so forth. And often that can be used to provide vital hooks into other data repositories that exist within that enterprise to correlate the data. And in some cases, we can't exactly correlate the data, but we can learn enough from the data to group people into families of similarity. But the truth is, I think you articulate a problem that exists that is not all within our gift, something that is not totally soluble by us, or certainly us as a company, because we don't have a big data repository for every data type with a complete cross-reference correlation across the top, which I fully accept would be a really great thing to own as an enterprise.
Thank you. So my questions are on the proliferation of these experiences. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the language issue, 7, 8, 10, 35 languages. That creates issues in your ability to create the dialogues and the conversations. And then you multiply it with these different channels that have different capabilities, something from WeChat, Facebook, all the way down to a simple chat. Can you discuss a little bit more about your strategy or recommended strategy for dealing with this, ability to kind of create one great experience, but then maybe trim down that experience when you need to get
Indeed.
down to a simple client?
I can. Thanks very much for raising that point. There are few advantages in being a European software company. Very few advantages. However, one of them is that we don't add multilingual later. It's part of the blueprint of the solution from the get-go. And therefore, you know, when I first took the company over in 2010, then we had 21 languages. We've now got 35. That's not the end of the journey. So the same engine runs all 35. So actually, from an enterprise point of view, it's inherent to our platform to have a reference installation, many of those are in English, and then to be able to clone to different languages. However, we have to be cognizant that we don't just use machine-based translation to copy from one to the other. I wouldn't buy my house on a machine-based translated contract from Spanish. So we do go through that, but the same enterprise processes exist. And even where they vary, we allow you as a user to clone it and then vary at this point. And that helps greatly with the management of the multinational issue, and that was right from the get-go in our platform. The second point, however, you make is that the proliferation of channels just is a multiplier on that problem. And we accept that. And we accept that not only do they have different technological restrictions, but also it's not necessarily right or appropriate to give the same length, for instance, of response. And let's say we're going to play some TTS output, you know, we might well want to abbreviate that, so rather than reading them all 12 pages of the terms and conditions, yeah? So the platform facilitates the concept of channels and outcomes, and you can customize what goes down which channel, mindful of the technology it will support, and mindful of the type of interaction that you want to run down that channel. But the data sources and all the same, they're all the same. So what is my bank balance? It's whatever channel you ask the question, it's the same answer. Yeah? It might be presented differently, but it's the same answer. A singing bank balance, that'd be nice.
Karaoke interaction. Well, thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.